Staff Sergeant Maria Santos wiped the black grease from her hands with a worn-out rag, the desert sun beating down mercilessly on forward operating Base Falcon. The sound of diesel engines rumbled across the compound as another convoy prepared to roll out into the dangerous streets of Afghanistan. But Maria wouldn't be going with them. She never did. "Hey, grease monkey." Sergeant Miller's voice cut through the hot air like a blade. "When you're done playing with your little wrenches, we need coffee in the command center." Maria looked up from under the hood of the massive MRAP vehicle she'd been working on for the past 3 hours. Sweat mixed with engine oil streaked her face, but her dark eyes remained steady. She'd heard worse. Much worse. "I'm not done with the transmission repair," she replied calmly, turning back to her work. "This truck won't make it past the gate if I don't finish." Miller laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the concrete barriers surrounding the motor pool. "Listen, Santos, nobody cares about your little mechanic games. These trucks have been running fine for months without your improvements." The other soldiers standing nearby chuckled. They always did. To them, Maria was just the girl who fixed things when they broke. Nothing more. Nothing special. Certainly not someone who belonged in their brotherhood of warriors. But Maria had something they didn't know about. Something she'd never told anyone on this base. Before she became a mechanic, before she volunteered for this deployment to prove herself, she'd been something else entirely. Something the Army had trained her to be in a program so classified that most soldiers didn't even know it existed. "Santos." Lieutenant Colonel Harrison's voice boomed across the motor pool. "My office, now." Maria straightened up, unconsciously squaring her shoulders. Harrison was old-school military, the kind of commander who believed women belonged in support roles, not on the front lines. He'd made that crystal clear from the day she arrived at Phoebe Falcon 6 months ago. She walked across the dusty compound, past the endless rows of tan-colored buildings and razor wire. Soldiers stopped their conversations to watch her pass. Some shook their heads. Others whispered. The message was always the same: what's she doing here? Harrison's office was cramped and stuffy, filled with maps, reports, and the constant hum of air conditioning that never quite managed to cool the room. The colonel sat behind his metal desk, his weathered face set in its usual expression of barely contained frustration. "Sit down, Santos." Maria remained standing. "Sir, I prefer to stand." Harrison's eyes narrowed. "I said sit down, Sergeant." She sat, but kept her back straight, her hands folded in her lap. Whatever this was about, she wouldn't give him the satisfaction of seeing her nervous. "I've been getting complaints," Harrison began, shuffling through papers on his desk, "about your attitude. Some of the men feel you're not fitting in with the unit. Sir, I complete my assigned duties and follow all orders. My maintenance reports show. This isn't about your wrench turning, Santos." Harrison leaned back in his chair. "This is about knowing your place. You're a mechanic. That's it. But lately, you've been asking questions about patrol routes, defensive positions, communications protocols. That's not your job." Maria felt her jaw tighten. She'd been studying everything she could about the base's operations, trying to understand how all the pieces fit together. In her previous life, before the mechanic training, she'd learned that survival meant knowing everything about your environment, every weakness, every strength, every possible way in or out. "I'm trying to better understand how my vehicle maintenance fits into the bigger picture, sir. If I know where the trucks are going, I can better prepare them for specific terrain and threats." Harrison slammed his hand on the desk. "The bigger picture isn't your concern. Your concern is keeping our vehicles running. Period. Leave the tactical thinking to the real soldiers." The words stung, but Maria had heard variations of them her entire military career. She'd grown up in East LA, where being underestimated was a daily reality. Her father had taught her that actions spoke louder than words, and that sometimes you had to let people think you were weak until the moment you proved them wrong. "Is that all, sir?" "No, it's not all." Harrison pulled out a sheet of paper. "I'm recommending you for transfer back to a rear support base. Somewhere more appropriate for someone with your skill set." Maria's heart sank. She'd volunteered for this deployment specifically to prove that she belonged on the front lines. She'd turned down safer assignments, easier postings, even a promotion that would have kept her stateside, all because she believed she had something to offer beyond just fixing engines. "Sir, my performance reviews have been excellent. My vehicles have the lowest breakdown rate in the sector. I've never missed a deadline or failed to complete a repair. This isn't about performance, Santos. It's about fit. You don't fit here." As Maria stood to leave, Corporal Jenkins burst through the door without knocking. His face was pale, his hands shaking as he tried to catch his breath. "Sir, we've lost contact with the patrol that went out this morning. All 3 trucks." Radio went dead about 20 minutes ago. Harrison jumped to his feet. "What's their last known position?" "Grid reference 314-592, sir. About 15 clicks north of here." "But sir," Jenkins swallowed hard, "intelligence is reporting massive enemy movement in that sector. They think it might be a coordinated attack." Maria felt ice form in her stomach. Grid reference 314-592, she knew that area. She'd studied the maps obsessively, memorizing every road, every building, every possible ambush point. The patrol had driven straight into what the locals called the cemetery, a stretch of broken terrain where convoys went to die. "How many men?" Harrison demanded. 12, sir, including Sergeant Miller. The same Sergeant Miller who'd called her a grease monkey not 30 minutes ago. The same man who thought she didn't belong here. Harrison was already moving, barking orders into his radio. "I want every available vehicle prepped for immediate departure. Get me Captain Rodriguez and Lieutenant Walsh now." But as he spoke, Maria was calculating. She knew something Harrison didn't, something she'd noticed while performing maintenance on their communications equipment just last week. A small flaw in the radio system that would become critical if they tried to launch a rescue mission without fixing it first. She also knew something else. Something she'd been keeping secret since the day she arrived at FOB Falcon. Her real training. Her real background. The program that had taught her not just to fix machines, but to become one herself when necessary. As the base erupted into controlled chaos around her, Maria made a decision that would change everything. She wasn't going to sit in the motor pool while 12 soldiers died because everyone thought she was just a mechanic. But first, she had to survive what was coming next. Because as Jenkins continued his briefing, the terrible truth became clear. The attack on the patrol wasn't random. It was a diversion. The real target had always been FOB Falcon itself. The first mortar round hit the east wall of FOB Falcon at exactly 13:47 hours. Maria felt the ground shake beneath her feet as she stood in the motor pool, watching Harrison's rescue team scramble to assemble. The explosion sent concrete dust raining down from the ceiling of the maintenance bay, and every vehicle alarm on the base began wailing at once. "Incoming! Take cover!" The shout echoed across the compound as soldiers dove for the nearest bunkers. But Maria didn't move. She was staring at the communications tower on the far side of the base, watching the radio equipment she'd worked on just days ago. The same equipment Harrison's rescue team would need to coordinate with the missing patrol. The same equipment that had a critical flaw she'd discovered but hadn't been allowed to fix, because she was just a mechanic. Santos. "Get to the bunker!" Harrison's voice cut through the chaos as another mortar round whistled overhead, this one landing closer to the command center. "Sir, the communications array," Maria started, but Harrison was already moving, shouting orders into his radio. "I don't have time for your mechanical concerns. Get to safety!"
"That's an order."
Maria watched him disappear into the command bunker with his staff. Around the base, soldiers were taking defensive positions, but she could see the confusion in their movements. They'd been caught off guard. The missing patrol, the intelligence reports, the assumption that any attack would come from the north where most of the enemy activity had been concentrated. It had all been a carefully orchestrated deception. The real assault was coming from 3 directions at once. Maria had seen the signs while working on vehicles returned from patrol over the past weeks. Subtle damage to undercarriages that suggested improvised explosive devices had been placed and removed without detonating. Scratches on armor plating that indicated someone had been studying their defensive capabilities. Small things that individually meant nothing, but together painted a picture of an enemy that had been watching, learning, preparing. She'd tried to report it. Harrison had dismissed her observations as female paranoia. Now, as explosions continued to rock the base and small arms fire began echoing from the perimeter, Maria realized she had a choice to make. She could follow orders, hide in a bunker, and watch good soldiers die because the men in charge were too proud to listen to a woman who fixed trucks, or she could do what she'd been trained to do before she became Staff Sergeant Santos, the mechanic, before she became the woman everyone underestimated. The communications tower took a direct hit just as she made her decision. Maria sprinted across the compound, ignoring the bullets that kicked up dust around her feet. She'd memorized the layout of Fob Falcon during her months of just fixing trucks. Every bunker, every blind spot, every piece of equipment that would be critical if the base came under siege. She reached the command bunker as Harrison was screaming into a dead radio. "Sir, the primary communications array is down," she said, breathing hard. "But I can reroute through the backup system in the motor pool if you give me 10 minutes. Harrison barely looked at her. "We don't have 10 minutes. The rescue team needs to move now or those soldiers are dead. Sir, without communications, your rescue team will be driving blind. They won't be able to coordinate with air support, call for backup, or even confirm the enemy positions. You'll be sending them into the same trap that got the patrol." Captain Rodriguez, Harrison's second-in-command, stepped forward. "Colonel, maybe we should listen." "I don't need advice from a mechanic." Harrison's face was red with frustration and fear. "Santos, I told you to get to a bunker. Do it now." Another explosion shook the bunker, closer this time. Dust cascaded from the ceiling as the lights flickered. Through the small window, Maria could see muzzle flashes from the tree line beyond the perimeter wire. The enemy was already inside the outer defensive ring. "Sir?" Lieutenant Walsh's voice cracked as he looked up from his instruments. "We're picking up radio chatter. Enemy forces. They're talking about taking prisoners. High-value prisoners." Maria's blood ran cold. She knew what that meant. The enemy wasn't just trying to overrun the base or rescue their captured comrades. They were planning something bigger. Something that required specific hostages for leverage. "How many men do we have combat ready?" Harrison demanded. 47, sir. But 15 are already committed to the perimeter defense, and you assigned 12 to the rescue mission. That leaves us 20 soldiers to hold a base designed for 200, Maria said quietly. Harrison spun around. "I thought I told you." "You did, sir. But I'm telling you something important." Maria stepped closer, her voice steady despite the chaos erupting around them. "I've been studying enemy tactics in this region for months, while maintaining the vehicles that patrol their territory. This isn't a random attack. They've been planning this for weeks, maybe months. Based on what? Scratches on truck bumpers. Based on reconnaissance patterns, attack timing, target selection, and coordinated movements." Maria pulled out a small notebook she always carried. 3 weeks ago, Bravo Team reported unusual civilian activity near Checkpoint 7. 2 weeks ago, Alpha Team found fresh tire tracks in a supposedly abandoned compound. Last week, Charlie Team's vehicle was disabled by an IED that seemed designed to study our armor, rather than destroy it. Rodriguez looked at the notebook, then at Harrison. "Sir, that does sound like... It sounds like a mechanic trying to play soldier." Harrison slammed his fist on the table. "We don't have time for theories." But even as he spoke, the radio crackled with a weak transmission. It was Sergeant Miller's voice, barely audible through the static. "Falcon Base, this is Bravo 7. We're pinned down. Heavy casualties. They knew we were coming." The transmission cut out. Maria looked at Harrison, then at Rodriguez, then at the faces of the men around her. Fear, confusion, the dawning realization that everything was going wrong at once. "Sir," she said quietly, "I can get communications back online. I can analyze the enemy positions based on their attack patterns. And I can tell you how they're planning to breach the inner perimeter." "You're a mechanic, Santos." "Yes, sir. I am." Maria's voice remained calm, but something in her eyes had changed. Something hard and determined that made Rodriguez take a step back. "But before I was a mechanic, I was something else. Something you never bothered to ask about." Harrison stared at her. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about why a decorated special operations veteran volunteered to be just a mechanic at a forward operating base in the middle of enemy territory." Maria pulled off her dog tags and handed them to Rodriguez. "Check the classification codes, sir." Rodriguez studied the tags, his eyes widening. "Colonel, these are..." How is this possible? But Harrison wasn't listening. Another transmission was coming through the damaged radio, this one clearer. It was an enemy voice speaking accented English. "American soldiers, we know you can hear us. Surrender your base and your female mechanic and we will let the others live." The bunker fell silent except for the sound of gunfire outside. They wanted Maria. They knew exactly who she was. The silence in the command bunker stretched like a taut wire ready to snap. Outside, the sound of gunfire was getting closer. But inside, Every eye was fixed on Maria as the enemy's words echoed through the damaged radio speaker. "Surrender your female mechanic." Rodriguez slowly handed Maria's dog tags back to her, his face pale. "Colonel," he whispered, "her classification codes. They're from the 75th Ranger Regiment, Special Operations, Counterintelligence." Harrison stared at Maria as if seeing her for the first time. "That's impossible. You're a mechanic. Your file says..." "My file says what it needs to say," Maria interrupted, clipping her tags back on. "But Sergeant Major, sometimes the best way to gather intelligence on enemy operations is to be the person they never suspect. The person they dismiss. The person they think is just fixing their captured equipment." Another explosion rocked the bunker, this one close enough to crack the concrete wall. Lieutenant Walsh looked up from his instruments, panic in his voice. "Sir, they've breached the outer perimeter. East and west side simultaneously." "How many?" Harrison demanded. "At least 60 combatants, sir. Maybe more. They're using our own defensive positions against us." Maria moved to the tactical map on the wall, studying the base layout with eyes that had suddenly become those of a seasoned operator, not a grease-stained mechanic. "They're herding us toward the center of the base. Classic pincer movement. They want us contained, not eliminated." "What do you mean?" Rodriguez asked. "They need prisoners, remember? High-value targets. But specifically, they need me." Maria traced enemy positions on the map with her finger. "This whole attack, the missing patrol, even the communications breakdown, it's all designed to force a specific response." Harrison was struggling to process what he was hearing. "Why would they want you specifically?" Maria was quiet for a moment, her hand unconsciously moving to a small scar on her neck, barely visible beneath her uniform collar. "6 months ago, before I requested transfer to this unit, my team intercepted a high-value enemy asset. Someone with detailed knowledge of a planned operation against American forces throughout this region." "What kind of operation?" "The kind that starts with taking a forward operating base and using it as a staging ground for something much bigger." Maria turned from the map, her expression grim. "The asset we captured? He was the brother of the local warlord who's been supplying weapons to insurgent groups across 3 provinces. Walsh's radio crackled again. This time it was Sergeant Miller's voice, weak but clearer. "Falcon Base. We're trapped in Building 17. They're not trying to kill us. They want us alive." Rodriguez grabbed the handset. "Bravo 7, this is Falcon Base. How many enemy in your position?" "At least 20. But sir, they keep asking about the female mechanic. They know her name?" Harrison looked at Maria with a mixture of fear and confusion. "They know your name?" "They know more than my name, Colonel. They know exactly why I'm here." Maria moved to the weapons locker, pulling out tactical gear with practiced efficiency. "The intelligence I extracted from their captured asset didn't just reveal a plan to attack bases like this one. It revealed the location of their main weapons cache. Enough ordnance to supply insurgent operations for years. So why didn't you report this?" Harrison's voice was rising. "Why the charade with being just a mechanic?" Maria stopped what she was doing and looked directly at him. "Because, sir, I did report it. To my commanding officer, who told me that a female operative's assessment was unreliable and that I should stick to support roles where I belonged." The words hung in the air like an accusation. Rodriguez shifted uncomfortably, remembering his own dismissive comments about Maria over the past months. "But the real reason they want me," Maria continued, strapping on body armor, "is because I'm the only person who knows the exact location of their weapons cache, and the only person who can identify their asset, who they think is safely imprisoned back at Bagram." "Is he?" Maria's smile was cold. "Not anymore. My former unit moved him to a secure facility yesterday. They don't know that yet." Another transmission crackled through the radio, this time in clear English with a heavy accent. "Colonel Harrison, we know you're listening. You have 10 minutes to send out the woman who calls herself Santos, or we begin executing your soldiers one by one." Walsh looked up from his instruments, his face white. "Sir, I'm reading at least 80 enemy combatants now. They've completely surrounded the base." Harrison grabbed Maria's arm as she finished gearing up. "You can't seriously be thinking of going out there." "I'm not going out there, sir. I'm going to end this." Maria shrugged off his grip. "But first I need you to do something for me." "What?" "Stop thinking of me as just a mechanic." Maria moved to the radio equipment, her hands working with the same precision she'd shown while repairing truck engines. but with a speed and expertise that revealed her true training. Within minutes, she had bypassed the queue, damaged primary system, and rerouted communications through 3 different backup channels. Falcon base to any friendly aircraft in the area. She spoke into the handset with calm authority. This is Raven 77 requesting immediate air support at grid reference 298447. Rodriguez's eyes widened. Raven 77? That's a special operations call sign. Yes, it is. Maria continued working the radio. And unlike my mechanical skills, my combat credentials haven't been questioned by command. The response came immediately. Raven 77, this is Apache 64. We have been holding at your location for 43 minutes waiting for contact. What is your situation? Harrison grabbed the handset from Maria. Apache 64, this is Colonel Harrison, Commanding Officer FOB Falcon. We are under heavy attack and need immediate... Negative, Colonel. The pilot's voice cut him off. My orders are to respond only to Raven 77. Ma'am, please confirm your authentication code. Maria took back the handset. Apache 64 authentication is Charlie Romeo 79 Delta. Authentication confirmed, Raven 77. We are standing by for your orders. Harrison stared at Maria with something approaching awe. Who are you, really? I'm exactly who I've always been, sir. The difference is that now you need me to be more than just the woman who fixes your trucks. The enemy radio transmission came again. More urgent this time. 5 minutes, Colonel. Send out the woman or your soldiers die. Maria looked at the tactical map one more time, then at the faces of the men around her. Fear, confusion, but also, for the first time, respect. Gentlemen, she said, checking her weapon one final time. Here's what we're going to do. You're going to give them exactly what they want. Maria, no, Rodriguez started. You're going to give them their female mechanic. Maria's smile was sharp as a blade, but they're not going to get the woman they think they're getting. Outside, the gunfire was intensifying. The enemy was tightening their noose around the base, confident that their prize was trapped and helpless. They were about to learn just how wrong they were. Maria walked out of the command bunker alone, her hands raised above her head, moving slowly across the dusty compound toward the main gate. The morning sun cast long shadows between the buildings, and the acrid smell of smoke and cordite filled the air. From hidden positions around the perimeter, at least 60 enemy fighters watched her approach. Their leader, a tall man with a distinctive scar across his left cheek, stepped out from behind an overturned vehicle. So, he called out in accented English, the famous female mechanic finally shows herself. I'm here, Maria replied, stopping 20 feet away from him. Let my soldiers go, the scarred man laughed. You think you can negotiate? You think you have any power here? He gestured to his fighters positioned throughout the base. We have studied you for months, Maria Santos. We know about the weapons cache. We know about our brother you captured. We know everything. Do you? Something in Maria's tone made him pause. Behind her, she could hear the faint sound of rotor blades in the distance, still too far away for the enemy to notice over the noise of the battle. You will tell us where our brother is being held. The scarred man continued. And you will tell us the exact location of the cache you discovered. Then perhaps your friends will live to see another day. Maria nodded slowly as if considering his terms. You're right about one thing. I did discover the location of your weapons cache. She paused, tilting her head slightly. But you're wrong about something else. What? You think you've been studying me for months. Maria's hands were still raised, but her stance had shifted almost imperceptibly. The truth is, I've been studying you. The scarred man's eyes narrowed. What are you talking about? Every vehicle that came back from patrol with unusual damage. Every report of civilian activity near our checkpoints. Every piece of equipment that was tampered with but not destroyed. Maria's voice remained calm, conversational. You thought you were being careful. You thought you were invisible. You're just a mechanic. I was never just a mechanic. Maria smiled, but it wasn't friendly. I was bait. The sound of rotor blades was getting louder now. The scarred man finally noticed, his head snapping toward the sky. You see, Maria continued, when intelligence suggested there was a planned attack on forward operating bases in this region, my unit needed someone to gather detailed information on enemy tactics and capabilities, someone who could observe without being suspected. The Apache helicopters came over the ridge like angry hornets, their chain guns already spinning up. Someone they would underestimate. The scarred man dove for cover as the first Apache opened fire, but Maria was already moving. She dropped into a combat roll, pulling a concealed sidearm from her boot as enemy fighters scrambled to respond to the sudden air assault. But the helicopters weren't the real surprise. As gunfire erupted around the compound, explosions began detonating throughout the enemy positions, not from above but from below. The ground beneath their carefully planned attack routes erupted in coordinated blasts that sent fighters diving for cover. Falcon base to all units. Maria's voice came through every radio on the base as she took cover behind a concrete barrier. This is Raven 7-7. Execute Operation Grease Trap. Harrison's voice crackled back through the comms. Maria, what the hell? Colonel, remember all those unnecessary modifications I made to our defensive systems over the past 6 months? The ones you said were a waste of time? From positions throughout Phoebe Falcon, carefully concealed explosive charges began detonating in sequence. Charges Maria had placed during her months of routine maintenance work. Every route the enemy had planned to use, every position they thought was secure, every avenue of approach they had scouted was suddenly transformed into a killing field. The scarred man struggled to his feet, screaming orders to his fighters, but his carefully orchestrated attack was falling apart. Half his men were trapped in positions they could no longer hold, and the other half were pinned down by coordinated fire from the Apache helicopters and the base's defensive positions. Bravo 7, this is Raven 7-7. Maria spoke into her radio while returning fire. What's your status? Sergeant Miller's voice came back stronger now. We're mobile, Raven 7-7. Moving to support your position. Negative, Bravo 7. Execute extraction route Charlie 3. You'll find the path cleared. How did you? Just trust me, Sergeant. Through her earpiece, Maria could hear Miller's team moving through what should have been enemy-controlled territory. But the routes she'd mapped, during her months of just fixing trucks, were proving to be exactly what they needed. Safe passages that bypassed enemy positions and led directly back to the base. The scarred man appeared from behind a damaged vehicle, his rifle trained on Maria's position. You think you have won? We have more fighters coming. This is not over. You're right, Maria called back, not taking cover. It's not over. The man squeezed the trigger, but his rifle clicked empty. He looked down in confusion, then back at Maria with growing understanding. Every weapon you captured from our failed patrols over the past months, Maria explained, standing up from her cover. Every piece of equipment you thought you had turned to your advantage. I had access to all of it during maintenance and repair. She held up a small electronic device. Ammunition that won't fire. Radios that broadcast your positions to our forces. GPS units that gave you false coordinates. Her smile was cold. You wanted the female mechanic? You got her. The Apache helicopters had finished their work on the perimeter positions. Enemy fighters were surrendering or fleeing across the open desert, their coordinated attack completely shattered. Rodriguez's voice came through the radio. Raven 7-7, we have enemy leadership in custody. The base is secure. Copy that, Falcon Base. Harrison emerged from the command bunker, followed by his staff. He walked across the compound toward Maria, stepping carefully around the debris of the failed attack. Sergeant Santos, he said when he reached her. Yes, sir. Harrison looked around at the enemy fighters lying wounded or surrendering, at the perfectly timed explosions that had turned their own plans against them, at the tactical precision that had transformed a potential massacre into a complete victory. I owe you an apology. No, sir, you don't. Harrison frowned. I underestimated you. I dismissed your abilities. You did exactly what I needed you to do, Colonel. Maria holstered her weapon. If you had treated me like a special operations veteran instead of just a mechanic, the enemy would have known something was wrong. They would never have revealed their full plan. Sergeant Miller approached with his rescued patrol, all 12 men accounted for. He stopped in front of Maria, his face a mixture of embarrassment and respect. Sergeant Santos, he said quietly, I called you a grease monkey. You did. I was wrong. Maria studied his face for a moment, then nodded. Sergeant Miller, I am a grease monkey. I'm also a lot of other things. She gestured toward the enemy prisoners being secured by base personnel. The trick is knowing when to be what. Rodriguez joined them, carrying Maria's personnel file. I've been reading your real service record, he said. 3 deployments in special operations. 12 confirmed enemy assets captured, 2 bronze stars and a purple heart. And now, Maria added, 6 months of the best intelligence gathering mission of my career. Harrison shook his head in amazement. All this time we thought you were just fixing trucks, Maria finished. Which I was. But I was also mapping enemy supply routes, documenting their communication patterns, identifying their local supporters, and preparing this base for exactly the kind of attack we just faced. She looked around at the faces of the men who had dismissed her, mocked her, and told her she didn't belong. The difference is, she continued, while you were seeing what you expected to see, I was doing what needed to be done. Later that evening, as the sun set over Fob Falcon and the last of the enemy prisoners were being processed, Maria sat in the motor pool, back in her grease-stained coveralls, working on the transmission of an MRAP vehicle. Harrison found her there, still trying to process everything that had happened. Santos? Yes, sir. What happens now? Maria looked up from under the hood, a wrench in her hand, a streak of oil across her cheek. Now, I finished fixing this transmission, sir. These trucks still need to run, but your real assignment is complete. Maria returned to her work. Intelligence gathered. Enemy network exposed. Base security protocols validated. She paused. But the trucks still need maintenance. Harrison watched her work for a moment. Would you be willing to stay as our senior maintenance chief? With full authority over vehicle operations and base defensive systems? Maria smiled without looking up. I'd like that, sir. But next time you get a mechanic who seems to know too much about things that aren't supposed to be her job, yes? Maybe ask her why instead of telling her she doesn't belong. As Harrison walked away, Maria continued working on the truck engine. Tomorrow there would be new missions, new challenges, new soldiers who would see her as just a mechanic. And that would be exactly where she wanted to be. Because sometimes the most dangerous person in the room is the one nobody suspects. Sometimes the strongest warrior is the one everyone underestimates, and sometimes being just anything is exactly enough to change everything. Staff Sergeant Maria Santos wiped the grease from her hands and smiled. She had work to do.